Welcome, Aibon. So in today's lesson, we're going to have a look at Cambridge Book 13, Test 4. And we're going to discuss the reading paper for the Academic IELTS component. Before we start that, I would like you to actually do the paper. So you can download Book 13, Test 4. Time yourself for 1 hour and answer all 40 questions. So pause the video here and have a look at the paper. Alright, so I think you would have completed the paper by now. Let's discuss the answers. So these are the answers. False, false, true, true, false, true, not given, true. Rule, navigator, gale, training, fire. Check for your spellings here. Passage 2, minerals, carbon, water, agriculture. Check for spellings again. C, E, A, D, E, C, F, G, F. Passage 3, 27 to 40. D, A, B, F, B, G, E, A. Yes, not given, no, not given, yes, no. So you can count how much you've got correct and put your score out of 40 and then find what band score you've got, right? So let's start discussing the answers. But before that, for the discussion, you must either have the hard copy of your paper or on one side of the screen, you can have the soft copy of the paper, and on the other side of the screen, you can minimize my video. Make sure that you're following through as I tell you because I want you to engage. You don't have the reading paper on my screen, right? So I want you to follow through with me. Passage 1. Cutty Sark, the fastest sailing ship of all time. Questions 1 to 8. Do the following statements agree with the information given in reading passage 1? So you have to say whether it's true, false, or not given, or yes, no, not given. Okay? Clippers were originally intended to be used as a passenger ships, right? So clippers originally intended to be used as passenger ships. Now, at the beginning of para 2, we find the statement, the fastest commercial sailing vessels of all times were clippers. 3-masted ships built to transport goods around the world. They were built to transport what? Goods. Were they built to move around passengers, or were they passenger ships? No. Very clearly it tells us that they were built to transport goods. So the answer is false, right? Cutty Sark was given the name of a character in a poem. Character in a poem. Go to para 3. The writer explains how the ship was given its name. Cutty Sark's unusual name comes from the poem Tam O'Shanter by the Scottish poet Robert Burns. Tam, a farmer, is chased by a witch called Nanny, who is wearing a cutty sark, an old Scottish name for a short night dress. So, was it a person or was it something that she wore? It was something that she wore. Cutty sark is an old Scottish name for a short night dress. Okay, so Cutty Sark was given the name of a character. No, character කියන්නේ මොකක් හරි ඒ චරිතයක්. So was it that? No. Answer is false. Okay, it was a piece of clothing worn by a witch in the poem. So moving on, question number 3. The contract between John Willis and Scott and Linton favored Willis, right? So let's see the contract between Willis, Scott and Linton. Okay, come to para 4 where we find the keywords. To carry out construction, Willis chose a new shipbuilding firm, Scott and Linton, and ensured that the contract with them put him in a very strong position. Put him in a very strong position means it favored him. එයාගේ වාසියට තමයි ඒක තිබ්බේ, right? To be in a strong position means that the contract gave Willis an added advantage in the business deal. So therefore, it is true. Right? Question number 4. John Willis wanted Cutty Sark to be the fastest tea clipper traveling between the UK and China, right? So Willis wanted Cutty Sark to be the fastest tea clipper traveling between UK and China. At the beginning of para 5, right, we find some key words. Willis, Britain, Britain means UK and China. Willis Company was active in the tea trade between China and Britain, where speed could bring ship owners both profits and prestige. So, Cutty Sark was designed to make the journey more quickly than any other ship. Than any other ship. Any other means it gives that superlative form, the fastest. Okay. So, tea clipper, yes, right? And definitely between the UK and China. So the idea of Willis was that the Cutty Sark would transport the tea between China and UK faster than any other ship, which would be the fastest way. So the answer is going to be true. Right? 5. Despite storm damage, Cutty Sark beat Thermoply back to London. Okay, so despite storm damage, beat Thermoply back to London. Okay, so we need to find information about the race from China to London. And we see that at the end of para 5. Okay. We learned that in the 1872, the ship and a rival clipper, the Thermoply, left port in China on the same day. Although Cutty Sark gained the lead, she was damaged. But then her rudder was similarly damaged in stormy seas. Right? So it was bad. Cutty Sark reached London in a week after Thermoply, right? So despite the storm damage, even though she was damaged by the storm, Cutty Sark beat means Cutty Sark reached before Thermoply? No, right? Thermoply. Thermopylae actually reached it. It says Cutty Sark reached London a week after. So because it was after, here it says first. Is that correct? No, wrong. So the answer is false. Question number 6. The opening of the Suez Canal meant that steamships could travel between Britain and China faster than clippers, right? So the opening of the Suez Canal meant that steamships could travel between Britain and China faster. All right, so the key words are found at the beginning of para 6. Steamships posed a growing threat to clippers as their speed and cargo capacity increased, right? In addition, the opening of the Suez Canal in 1869 had a serious impact. And then the writer explains why only steamships could make use of the Suez Canal, and that this meant that the steamships could make the journey faster than clippers using this short route. Steamships reduced the journey time between Britain and China by approximately 2 months. So therefore, the answer is true. Okay, so that they could travel to Britain faster, yes, it reduced by 2 months, which means it's much faster. Steamships sometimes use the ocean route to travel between London and China. The writer says in para 6, not only steamships were able to use the Suez Canal, but there is no information whether they actually took the journey to London and China using a longer ocean route. We don't know that. Because it's not mentioned, answer would be not given. Question number 8. Captain Woodgate put Cutty Sark at risk of hitting an iceberg. Okay, so Captain Woodgate risk of hitting an iceberg. Captain Woodgate is mentioned in para 8. An excellent navigator, he took Cutty Sark on a route travelling a long way south to take advantage of the winds. Woodgate took her further south than any previous captain, bringing her dangerously close to icebergs off the southern tip of South America. His gamble paid off though, and the ship was the fastest vessel in the wool trade for 10 years. Right? So he did put Cutty Sark at a risk of getting hit. Yes, it says he dangerously, right, bringing her dangerously close to the icebergs off the southern tip. Yes, it was dangerous. Bringing her dangerously means putting Cutty Sark at a risk. So yes, it was true, and the answer then should be true. Question number 9 to 13. Complete the sentences below. After 1880, Cutty Sark carried as its main cargo during its most successful time. So in 1880, cargo most successful, what did Cutty Sark carry? Looking at the keywords, we find the answer in para 7. In 1880, 2 captains of the ship lost their jobs. Then a new captain was appointed. This marked a turnaround and the beginning of the most successful period of Cutty Sark's working life, transporting wool from Australia to Britain. Right? Thus, after 1880, the ship had its most successful period carrying wool. So what did it carry? It actually carried wool, and that is going to be your answer. Question 10. As a captain and blank, Woodgate was very skilled. Okay, so captain, Woodgate, skilled. The key words are in para 8. The ship's next captain, Richard Woodgate, was an excellent navigator, right? Who got the best out of both his ship and his crew. So as a captain, right, he was very skilled, but also he was an excellent navigator. So as a captain and navigator, he was very skilled. Okay. Question 11. Ferreira went to Falmouth to repair damage that a blank had caused. Okay. In para 9, we find a reference to the Ferreira. The Cutty Sark was sold to a Portuguese firm which renamed her Ferreira. In para 10, we learn what caused the damage. Badly damaged in a gale. In 1922, she was put into Falmouth Harbour in southwest England for repairs. Right? So Ferreira went to Falmouth to repair the damage that a gale had caused. Answer is gale. Question number 12. Between 1923 and 1954, Cutty Sark was used for what? Now, if we go to para 10, we learn that the ship returned to Falmouth 1 year after it was repaired. The ship returned to Falmouth following a year, 1923, right? And her original name restored. Then in para 11, we learn what happened between 1923 and 1954. The new owner, manned Doman, used Cutty Sark as a training ship, and she continued in this role after his death. When she was no longer required in 1954, she was transferred to dry dock at Greenwich to go on public display. So between these years, the ship was used for what? 1923 and 54. So there was a new owner named Doman, and Cutty Sark was a training ship. So it was used for training. Question number 13. Cutty Sark has twice been damaged by in the 21st century, right? So Cutty Sark twice damaged 21st century. In the final para, we find the most recent information about the ship in the 21st century. The ship suffered from fire. What was it damaged by? Suffered means damaged by what? Fire. Passage 2, saving the soil. Questions 14 to 17, complete the summary below. Healthy soil contains a large variety of bacteria and other microorganisms as well as plant remains and, right? So healthy soil contains a large variety of bacteria, other microorganisms as well as plant remains. So we need to find information on the contents of healthy soil. Using the keywords, we find this in the first part in para B. A single gram of healthy soil might contain 100 million bacteria, right? As well as microorganisms such as viruses and fungi, living amid decomposing plants and various minerals. as well as plant remains and, so we have plant remains, decomposing plants and what? Various minerals. So just minerals would be fine. Next one. It provides us with food and also with antibiotics, and its function in storing blank has a significant effect on the climate, right? So it provides us with food and also with antibiotics, and storing has a significant effect of the climate. And what does it store, right? So if you go to the second part in para B, that gives us the answer. Soils do not just grow our food, but are the source nearly of our existing antibiotics and could be our best hope in the fight against antibiotic resistance bacteria. Soil is also an ally against climate change, as microorganisms within soil digest dead animals. They lock in their carbon content, holding 3 times the amount of carbon as does the environment. Soil is also an ally against climate change, as microorganisms within soil digest dead animals and plants, and they lock their carbon content, holding 3 times the amount of carbon as does the entire atmosphere, right? So it provides us with food, antibiotics, and a function storing. Storing means lock. So what do they lock? They lock carbon, right? So storing carbon has a significant effect on the climate, atmosphere's climate, right? All right, so question number 16. In addition, it prevents damage to property and infrastructure because it holds what? Okay, so it prevents damage to property and infrastructure because it holds what? Continuing to look for the keywords, in para B, we find the answer. Soils also store water, preventing flood damage in the UK, damage to buildings, roads and bridges. So property, buildings, roads and bridges, infrastructure. From flood caused by soil degradation costs 233 million every year. Okay. So store means holds, right? And what does it hold? Water. So the answer is going to be water. Okay. Oops, it should be still water, 2 words, right? Clear? So in addition, it prevents the damage to property, which is buildings, right? Preventing flood damage in the UK, that is damage to buildings and the infrastructure, but it stores water. Okay, so water is the answer. The main factor contributing to soil degradation is something carried out by the humans, right? So is some process that is carried out by the humans. We find the answer in para C. Agriculture is by far the biggest problem. Humans tend not to return unused parts of harvested crops directly to the soil to enrich it, meaning that the soil gradually becomes less fertile. So the main factor becomes less fertile means soil degradation, right? And the biggest factor, it says here, the biggest problem, okay? The biggest problem is the main factor, right? So the main factor contributing to the soil degradation is what? What is it? Agriculture. Yeah. Agriculture is far by the biggest problem. That is the main problem, main factor. So degradation is agriculture carried out by humans, and that is the answer. Questions 18 to 21. Complete the sentence with the correct endings A to F. Right, you should have the paper in front of you. Nutrients contained in the unused parts of harvested crops. Right. We find these keywords in the second part of para C. When the plants die and decay, these nutrients are returned directly to the soil. Okay. Humans tend not to return unused parts of the harvested crops directly to the soil to enrich it, meaning that the soil gradually becomes less fertile. So, ending C gives us the following sentence. Nutrients contained in the unused parts of the harvested crops may not be put back into the soil, right? That is, tend not to return. So, the answer should be C. You have to look at your paper, right? Because I am giving the explanation. Question number 19. Synthetic fertilizers produced with the Haber-Bosch process. Okay. Paragraph D contains these words. A solution came in the early 20th century with the Haber-Bosch process of manufacturing ammonium nitrate. Okay. Farmers have been putting this synthetic fertilizer on their fields ever since. Continuing to read, we find the problems of using these synthetic fertilizers, right? Chemical fertilizers can release polluting nitrous oxide into the atmosphere, and excess is often washed away with rain, releasing nitrogen into rivers. More recently, we have found that indiscriminate use of fertilizers hurts the soil itself, turning it acidic and salty. So, the ending of E gives us synthetic fertilizers produced with the Haber-Bosch process may cause damage to different aspects of the environment. These different aspects are the atmosphere, river and the soil. So the best answer is going to be E. 20. Addition of a mixture developed by Pierce Floris to the soil. Okay. So addition mixture developed by Pierce Floris. Okay. The name Pierce Floris is mentioned in para E. He developed a cocktail of beneficial bacteria, fungi and humus. Researchers then used this cocktail on soils destroyed by years of fertilizer overuse. When they applied Floris's mix to the desert-like plots, a good crop of plants emerged that were not just healthy at the surface, but had roots strong enough to pierce dirt as hard as rock. The few plants that grew in the control plots fed with traditional fertilizers and were small and weak. So the ending of A gives us addition of mixture developed by Pierce Floris to the soil may improve the number of quality of plants growing there, and therefore the most appropriate answer is going to be A. The idea of zero net soil degradation. So idea of zero soil degradation. Now if you go to para G, you find reference to zero net land degradation. It is a goal which policymakers can easily understand, the idea of carbon neutrality. Scientists have therefore proposed this goal to shape expectations and encourage action. We need ways of presenting the problem that bring it home to governments and wider public, says Pamela at the International Institute for Sustainable Development in Winnipeg, Canada. Ending, D gives us the following sentence, right? The idea of zero net soil degradation may help governments to be more aware of the soil-related issues. So therefore, the answer would be D. Right? 22 to 26. Reading passage 2 has 7 paras A to G. A reference to one person's motivation for a soil improvement project. In para E, Pierce is mentioned. His motivation to improve the soil came from running a tree care business in the Netherlands. The writer tells us that he came to realize that the best way to ensure trees flourished was to take care of the soil, and has developed a cocktail of beneficial bacteria, fungi and humus to do this. Therefore, the person referred to is in para E. 23. An explanation of how soil stayed healthy before the development of farming. Go to para C. It states, humans tend not to return unused parts of harvested crops directly to the soil to enrich it, right? So it says an explanation of how soil stayed healthy before the development of farming, meaning that the soil gradually becomes less fertile. In the past, we developed strategies to get around the problem, such as regularly varying the types of crops grown, leaving fields uncultivated for a season. So two different strategies are described as to how, and the answer should be C. 24. Examples of different ways of collecting information on soil degradation. Go to para F and we learn that the UN has created the Global Soil Map Project. Researchers from 9 countries are working together to create a map linked to a database that can be fed measurements from field surveys, drone surveys, satellite imagery, lab analysis, and so on, right? To provide real-time data on the state of the soil. So several different ways of collecting information are given, right, as examples. Therefore, the answer is going to be F. Right. Question number 25. A suggestion for a way keeping some types of soil safe in the near future. In the final paragraph, we find the following statement. Several researchers are agitating for the immediate creation of protected zones for endangered soils, right? So this is a suggestion that the researchers want to keep some soil types safe by creating protected zones. Therefore, the most appropriate answer is going to be G. 26. A reason why it is difficult to provide an overview of soil degradation. Difficult, provide overview, soil degradation. We find the answer in para F. To assess our options on a global scale, we first need an accurate picture of what types of soil are out there and the problems they face. That's not easy. For one thing, there is no agreed international system for classifying soil. So therefore, we need to have an accurate picture of the different types of soil and the dangers to them. Right? The reason that it is difficult is that we have no agreed way of doing this. And where do we find the answer? Para F. Questions 27 to 29, book review, passage 3. Choose the correct letter A, B, C or D. What is the reviewer's attitude to advocates of positive psychology? Right? In para 1, the reviewer introduces the beliefs of the advocates of positive psychology. At the beginning of para 2, we find reviewer's opinion of these beliefs. It is an astonishingly crude and simple-minded way of rethinking, and for that very reason, increasingly popular. Those who think this way are oblivious to the vast philosophical literature in the world. The meaning and value of happiness have been explored and write as if nothing of any importance had been thought on the subject until it came to your attention, right? So the attitude of the reviewer is that the advocates of positive philosophy are completely ignorant of all that has been thought and written about happiness by earlier thinkers. So answer is going to be D. Question number 28. The reviewer refers to the Greek philosopher Aristotle in order to suggest that happiness. Right, okay. The reviewer refers to the Greek philosopher Aristotle in order to suggest that happiness. Okay. So, in para 2, we find a reference to Aristotle. For Bentham, it was obvious that human good consists of pleasure and the absence of pain. The Greek philosopher Aristotle may have identified happiness with self-realization in the 4th century BC, and thinkers throughout the ages may have struggled to reconcile and pursuit of happiness with other human values. Right? So therefore, the most appropriate answer may not just be pleasure and the absence of pain. Right? There you go. Question number 29. According to Davis, Bentham's suggestion for linking the price of goods to happiness was significant, right? Now, in para 4, Davis writes about Bentham's views on the connection between prince and pleasure happiness. So, in paragraph 4, Davis writes about Bentham's views on the connection between price and pleasure or happiness. If two different goods have the same price, it can be concluded that they produce the same quantity of pleasure in the consumer. By associating money so closely to inner experience, Davis writes, Bentham set the stage for entangling the psychological research and capitalism that would shape the business practices in the 20th century. Okay, so here are your similar words. So by looking at this, what is the understanding of the answer? It established a connection between work and psychology. So answer is going to be B. Questions number 30 to 34. Complete the summary using the list of words A to J below. Right? In the 1790s, he suggested a type of technology to improve what? For different government departments. Right. If you go to para 3, Davis writes about Bentham's active interest in areas outside philosophy. In 1790s, he wrote The Home Office through a set of conversation tubes. In other words, these conversation tubes would link together government departments and improve communication between them, right? So the most appropriate answer you could take would be F. 31. He developed a new way of printing banknotes to increase what? The reference to printing and banknotes is also in para 3. So Bentham suggests a design to the Bank of England, right, for a printing device that could produce unforgeable banknotes, because you can't forge it, right? If banknotes cannot be forged, then the purpose is to make them more difficult to copy by criminals. This will increase security, so definitely answer is going to be B. Question 32. And also designed a method for the what of food? Para 3. We learn about Bentham drew up plans for a frigidarium to keep provisions such as meat, fish, fruit, veggie fresh. Thus, in order to keep food fresh, the frigidarium was designed to preserve food in a cold storage. So what is the answer? G. 33. He also drew up plans for a prison which allowed the blank of prisoners at all times and believed the same design could be used for their institutions as well. Right? Okay. Now, the writer continues in para 3. He celebrated design for a prison to be known as a panopticon, which prisoners would be kept in solitary confinement while being visible at all times to the guards. And it was very near to be adopted. The writer tells us that this panopticon was also designed as an instrument of control that could be used in schools, factories, right? Not only in prison. As prisoners, they were able to As prisoners were visible to the guards would be able to observe the prisoners at all times, right? So the most appropriate answer is going to be E. 34. When researching happiness, he investigated possibilities for its blank and suggested some methods of doing this. So if you go to para 4, Bentham was also a pioneer of the science of happiness. So if happiness is to be regarded as a science, it has to be measured, and Bentham suggested 2 ways, right, that this could be done. So the most appropriate answer would be A. 35 to 40. Do the following statements agree with the claims of the writer? One strength of the happiness industry is its discussion of the relationship between psychology and economics. At the beginning of para 5, we are told about this book in terms of psychology and economics. The happiness industry describes how the project of a science of happiness has become integral to capitalism. We learn much that is interesting about how economic problems are being redefined and treated as psychological maladies, right? So, this book discusses how in capitalist societies an attempt has been made to consider economic problems and simply psychological problems. So this book is interesting because it shows how this has been done by writers. So one strength of happiness industry is its discussion. Yes, definitely yes. 36. It is more difficult to measure some emotions than others, right? More difficult to measure emotions than others. The only reference here in the passage, measurement and emotions, is para 5. In addition, Davis shows the belief that inner states of pleasure and displeasure can be objectively measured, right? But is it more difficult to measure? We don't know that. Therefore, the answer is not given. Comparatively, we don't know. 37. Watson's ideas on behaviorism was supported by research on humans he carried out before 1950, right? So Watson's ideas on his behaviorism were supported by research on humans before 1915, right? So the idea of Watson was discussed in para 5. The tendency of thinkers such as J.B. Watson, the founder of behaviorism, was that human beings could be shaped and manipulated by policymakers and managers. Watson had no basis of his view of human action. When he became the president of American Psychological Association, he had never studied a single human being. His research had been confined to experiments. Thus, before 1915, Watson had conducted no research on humans, only on white rats. No, that was not the case. Right? Okay. Question number 38. Watson's ideas have been most influential on governments outside America. So, Watson's ideas are discussed here, right? But they are the most influential outside America. We don't know that. So, therefore, the answer is not given. The need for happiness is linked to industrialization. Go to the last para. Modern industrial societies appear the possibility of ever increasing happiness to motivate them. So yes, that is true. And the last question, a main aim of the government should be to increase the population, happiness of population. Now, if you go to the last para again, it says, whatever its intellectual pedigree, the idea that governments should be responsible for promoting happiness is always a threat to human freedom. Right? So the main aim of the government should be to increase the happiness of the population. Well, government should take it a responsibility. Okay? When they say, if government takes a responsibility, it means that it's not yet happened. Right? So definitely answer is going to be no. So with that, I think we've discussed all 40 questions. So with that, we come to the end of Book 13, Test 4, Reading Paper Answer Discussion.